Welcome. It is Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz, Ben Ferguson with you. And Senator, it's nice to be back with you as we've got several big stories to chat about. One of them includes free speech and a total assault on anything that looks like free speech coming out of the European Union. Now they're going after X, the platform as well, in a shocking move.
Yeah, no, it really is a very dismaying development in the past week, which is the European Union fined X and fined Elon Musk $140 million for failing to comply with what they call transparency. And what that means is they want X to be censoring people. They want X to be silencing people who are speaking. We're going to break that down because that is a real threat to free speech in the United States. Secondly, there was a big gathering in Qatar, and Tucker Carlson, we've talked about him a lot on this podcast, he flew to Qatar. He interviewed the Prime Minister of Qatar. And, you know, it was an opportunity. Qatar is behind a lot of bad things in the United States. They're funding a lot of bad things in the United States. It was an opportunity for Tucker to really call him to account. He failed to do so. Instead, he embraced him. He bear hugged him. It really was a very disturbing episode. We're going to break that down as well.
All right, so Senator, I really want to just take a moment and break down for people so they understand what's happening in Europe and the reason why you should care if you're listening to this or watching this show in the U.S. is Europe can have a major influence on the U.S., number one,
Yep.
But two, it gives crazies on the left in this country real ideas, and they can say, look, this is what Europe is doing. This is what Europe has done. And now we're seeing Europe not only target free speech, and we've witnessed people getting arrested for what they've written online that was not a threat against a person, wasn't a threat against official, wasn't something like that. We're talking about free speech here is disappearing, but now they're also targeting the platforms that allow for people in their country to actually say what they believe or what's on their mind, and that is even, I think, more scary.
Well, we've talked about that the single most important step for free speech in our lifetimes was Elon Musk's buying Twitter. Twitter was actively censoring conservative views. It was promoting left-wing views. Elon came in. He spent nearly $50 billion to buy Twitter, and it transformed it because he created a free speech oasis. It is now the public square. And I will say without exaggeration, I don't know that Donald Trump wins in 2024 if Elon Musk hadn't bought Twitter because the corporate media is so utterly corrupt. They were pushing the Democrat talking points. They were silencing any point to the contrary. And Twitter being open and allowing free speech gave an opportunity to actually drive the facts. So when the Democrats would say the border is secure, Twitter would light them up because you'd actually get the facts that 12 million people were invading at the border and people understood. Now the EU, the European Union, is trying to go after Twitter, and they want Twitter to actively censor their content. Doing that would really hurt free speech in America. Let me read from the New York Times, not a place I often read from, and here's their story. Elon Musk's X hit with $140 million fine in Europe. The case over online transparency has become a point of contention between the European Union and the Trump administration. The European Union fined X, the social media company owned by Elon Musk, $140 million on Friday for violating one of the bloc's major laws targeting the technology industry. The case has been seen as a test of European officials' willingness to aggressively regulate tech companies at the risk of antagonizing the Trump administration. X is the first company, that's no surprise, the first company to be fined under the European Union's Digital Services Act, a sweeping law intended to force large internet companies to protect their platforms against manipulation and illicit content. The Trump administration has criticized the policy as an attack on free speech and American tech firms. Regulators in Brussels said the penalty against X was not about free speech, but about the company's lack of controls to prevent the platform from being abused. That includes X's deceptive design that allowed users to mislead others about their identities, opaque advertising practices, and refusal to provide independent researchers with access to public data. Look, at the end of the day, and one of the things X has done recently is they've started displaying on users what country they're coming from. That is really
transparency.
Valuable. Transparency. I'm all for more transparency, and I've urged Elon. Like we are seeing an American debate a lot of X users from foreign countries, from the Middle East, who are pushing anti-Semitic content, who are pushing anti-American content, who are pushing anti-free enterprise and anti-capitalist content. And they're from the Middle East, they're from China, they're from Asia. And that transparency, like identifying foreign actors, that's valuable. But that's not what the European Union is doing. And listen, they want, they say it's about misinformation, but understand what the European Union wants is they want views they don't like censored. And so I'll tell you, I've called on President Trump. This should not stand. If the European Union will not reverse this fine, I've called on the president to sanction the European Union, to use our economic leverage. We're not going to let Europe force their censorship on the United States of America. I think this is a really important testing moment for the Trump administration.
I got an interesting briefing on this earlier today from a legal group that's freedom of speech that reached out in the EU, and they said, Ben, what we are witnessing right now is trying to, in essence, force companies to pull out and to just say, hey, we would rather have no free speech, and this is what we'll do to get to a financial point where X would have to make a financial decision. The fines keep racking up on them. Finally, they just say, hey, we're not going to do business there. They actually believe that this could even be the governments in multiple countries now saying, we don't want free speech platforms. If we find you in that platform, you'll just say, fine, we'll shut it off to your part of the world.
Yeah, and understand this in the context of back in August of 2024. The EU sent a letter to Elon Musk demanding that Elon Musk censor Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So if you think this is about transparency, it's not. Let me read you some of that letter. So this is August 12th, 2024. Dear Mr. Musk, I'm writing in the context of recent events in the United Kingdom in relation to the planned broadcast on your platform X of live conversation between a U.S. presidential candidate and yourself, which will also be accessible to users in the EU. I understand that you're currently doing a stress test of the platform. In this context, I am compelled to remind you of the due diligence obligations set out in the Digital Services Act, as outlined in my previous letter. As the individual entity ultimately controlling a platform with over 300 million users worldwide, of which 1/3 is in the EU, that has been designated as a very large online platform, you have the legal obligation to ensure X's compliance with EU law, and in particular the DSA and the EU. This notably means ensuring, on the one hand, that freedom of expression and of information, including media freedom and pluralism, are effectively protected. That sounds good, but here's the other part. And, on the other hand, that all proportionate and effective mitigation measures are put in place regarding the amplification of harmful content in connection with relevant events, including live streaming, which, if unaddressed, might increase the risk profile of X and generate detrimental effects on civil discourse and public security. This is important against the background of recent examples of public unrest brought about by the amplification of content that promotes hatred, disorder, incitement to violence, or certain instances of disinformation. It also implies, 1, informing EU judicial and administrative authorities without undue delay on the measures taken to address their orders against content considered illegal, according to national and/or EU law, and 2, taking timely, diligent, non-arbitrary, and objective action against receipt of notices by users concerning certain illegal content. 3, informing users concerning the measures taken upon receipt of the relevant notice. And 4, publicly reporting about content moderation measures. In this respect, I note that the DSA obligations apply without exception or discrimination to the moderation of the whole user community and the content of X, including yourself as a user with over 190 million followers, which is accessible to EU users and should be fulfilled in line with the risk-based approach of the DSA, which requires greater due diligence in case of a foreseeable increase of the risk profile. As you know, formal proceedings are already ongoing against X under the DSA, notably in areas linked to the dissemination of illegal content and the effectiveness of the measures taken to combat disinformation. as the relevant content is accessible to EU users and being amplified also in our jurisdiction, we cannot exclude possible spillovers in the EU. Therefore, we are monitoring the potential risks in the EU associated with the dissemination of content that may incite violence, hate and racism in conjunction with major political or societal events around the world, including debates and interviews in the context of elections. Let me clarify that any negative effect of illegal content on X in the EU, which could be attributed to the ineffectiveness of the way that X applies the relevant provisions of the DSA, may also be relevant in the context of ongoing proceedings and of the overall assessment of X's compliance with EU law. This is in line with what has already been done in the recent past, for example, in relation to the repercussions and amplification of terrorist content that incites violence, hate, and racism in the EU, such as the content of the recent riots in the United Kingdom. I urge you to promptly ensure the effectiveness of your systems and report measures taken to my team. Yours sincerely, Thierry Breton. Look, that was literally in August of 2024. The EU was telling X, you're about to interview Donald Trump. He's running for president. He was going to be elected president just a few months after that. And we want you to silence what he says. If he talks about the open border, if he talks about murderers and rapists and gangbangers, terrorists coming across the southern border, we want you to censor that. Because you know what? It may make the terrorists and illegal immigrants in Europe unhappy if they hear that Donald Trump opposes that. It is. Look,
it also sounds like they were hoping that they would basically say, we're just going to not even take the risk. Just cancel the whole interview with Donald Trump.
Silence Trump is what they're saying.
Silence Trump. Don't do the interview. Then you don't have to worry about any of these issues with us that we're writing you about right now. That is an unbelievable amount of pressure coming from the EU to try to say to Twitter, you want to do, or X, you want to do business here, you better play by the rules that we're giving you. And we're telling you, don't interview the leading candidate for the presidency in the Republican Party.
And listen, Europe does not have the tradition of the First Amendment of the United States. The First Amendment protects free speech. We have a robust free speech culture. Europe has far less. They are willing to regulate free speech. But what they're trying to do here is silence free speech in America. They're trying to fine American companies. And by the way, under Joe Biden, the Biden administration was going to the European Union saying, will you fine American companies to force them to rein in their content? This is something that the Biden administration encouraged. And I got to tell you, I believe that the Trump administration is going to stop this. I will be shocked if Elon Musk pays this fine. I am publicly calling on the Trump administration to impose sanctions on the EU and sanctions that are of order of magnitude greater.
When you talk about sanctions on the EU, give examples for everybody that's listening or watching what that could look like.
Look, a 5% tariffs on all goods from the EU. I mean, that would, by the way, that would run into the billions of dollars, and suddenly Europe would have a choice. Do we want to spend billions of dollars in order to fine X $140 million? I don't know if they would or not. I think they'd reverse. So I'll tell you today, I met with the foreign minister of Latvia. And so often foreign heads of state, foreign ministers come to D.C., they come meet with me. And the foreign minister of Latvia, I like her. She's a nice woman. We've met before. And one of the things, and we were talking about the challenges in Europe. We were talking about increasing energy exports from the United States, from Texas to Europe. All of that's important. But I told her, I said, Minister, I want you to hear something. Americans are really, really deeply pissed off that the European Union is trying to fine X for allowing free speech.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, you need to take back to the EU. I believe the Trump administration will sanction Europe if you continue this. And I said further, I said, look, there are voices within the Trump administration that are arguing for America disengaging for Europe, arguing for essentially an isolationist foreign policy that says, we don't care what Europe does. You guys go on your own way. It's not our problem. Now, as you know, I disagree with that. I think Europe, we have many of our oldest alliances in the world. I think being a good friend to our allies, being a strong and formidable enemy to our enemies is really important. So I don't want to write Europe off. But I told the Latvian foreign minister today, I said, listen, when the EU does things like fines X for allowing free speech, you end up making my position much harder because you fuel the folks in the Trump administration that say, screw Europe, let's withdraw altogether because those guys, they hate us. I don't think Europe hates us, but I do think they have a different free speech tradition than they do. And in my view, we should not allow the EU to impose their government censorship perspective on America. I think we ought to press back really, really vigorously on this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that one. Senator, we've talked a lot about influence, foreign influence, and there is a lot of people that are like, I don't understand why it's a big deal that a bunch of Americans that are conservative influencers are running to countries like Qatar, taking trips over there that are being paid for by them and putting up what I would describe as propaganda on social media on behalf of Qatar. But people that see that, like, what's the big deal? Tucker Carlson shows up, speaks at this Doha forum. Why is that a big deal? Why should I care? I want you to explain, before we get to Tucker, what Qatar has been doing to influence America so people understand who we're dealing with and why you might want to ask the question, why would you be going there? Forget Tucker's name. There are a lot of conservatives I know that have been taking these types of trips recently. They're trying to buy influence in the conservative movement. And it's frustrating because I don't think people understand the threat that Qatar is to this country at all.
Look, Qatar is not our friend. Qatar is spending hundreds of millions of dollars lobbying the United States government. They are spending millions of dollars funding bots. You look at the anti-Semitic content, you look at the anti-American content that is online, Qatar is funding it. By the way, you look at the anti-Semitic protests on college campuses, Qatar is funding that. That they are profoundly hostile to America. And I will tell you, there was a conference this past week in Doha, which is in Qatar. You had a number of Americans go there, the most prominent of which was Tucker Carlson. And I want to tell you, look, I sent a tweet. So Tucker Carlson was going to interview the Prime Minister of Qatar. And listen, I have been very vocal that I think Tucker Carlson has become the most dangerous demagogue in America. I think he's doing enormous damage. But I try to give him an opportunity. So here's what I tweeted before his interview. I said the following. For years, Tucker Carlson has been accused of being on the payroll of Qatar. For years, he has denied it. This is now a beautiful opportunity for him to try to clear his name. Tomorrow, Tucker is interviewing the Prime Minister of Qatar in Doha. Tucker knows how to ask tough questions. Here are a few he should ask. Number one, Al Jazeera is a mouthpiece for anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism, and jihadist terrorism. Why does Qatar pour countless tens of millions into supporting it? Number two, why does Qatar back the Muslim Brotherhood, a group designated as a terrorist organization by several of Qatar's neighbors, and which President Trump is also moving to designate? Number three, Hamas planned the October 7th atrocities while Qatar hosted Hamas leadership. This included the kidnapping and murder of dozens of Americans. Even the Biden administration wanted Qatar to expel Hamas after hostage talks collapsed. Why did Qatar keep hosting Hamas leadership?
Let's just pause there for 1 second as you were tweeting this out, because I don't think people understand. They were actively hosting these terrorists.
Yeah, the leaders of Hamas live in Qatar. They live in opulent mansions. They live like billionaires while they are murdering not just Israelis but Americans, while they are raping not just Israelis but Americans. And Qatar is embracing them, and they're like movie stars living in Qatar. By the way, number four, speaking of which, on October 7th, 2023, Qatar issued a statement saying Israel alone was responsible for the violence. Then in September of 2024, Qatar's emir said Israel was responsible for the war expanding to Lebanon. Is that still Qatar's position? Number five, Qatar is the only Gulf country that still maintains male guardianship and travel restrictions for women. When do you intend to join the civilized world? So if you actually believe women have rights, that ain't the case in Qatar.
Explain what you mean by that real fast so that people understand the context of it, of what you're, because it may just sound like, okay, what does that even mean for women? What is life like there? Explain how that's so far back in the Stone Ages.
Look, the rights of women are severely limited in Qatar. Males are treated as the decision makers. They have control over their wives. They have control over their daughters. And the rights of women are severely diminished in Qatar. So that's an obvious question to ask of, like, why don't you believe women have any rights? Number 6, how much is Qatar paying to fund anti-Semitic protests on U.S. college campuses? Understand, we saw protests all over America. Qatar was spending millions of dollars to fund that. And simple question, why? Number 7, how much is Qatar paying to spy on U.S. government officials and why? And to be clear, there were multiple news stories. Qatar hired spies to spy on me because they viewed me as the U.S. government official most skeptical and antagonistic of Qatar. So they're actively spying on me. And number 8, finally, how much exactly are you paying conservative influencers to come to this conference and participate? Now, if Tucker had asked those questions, it would have been a big deal. Like he could he had the prime minister. Every one of those questions, they don't have a good answer to. But he didn't ask those questions. He didn't ask any difficult questions. He did the same thing he did when he interviewed Putin, which is he embraced him and kissed his rear end. He did the same thing when he interviewed the president of Iran, which is he embraced him and kissed his rear end. Tucker has a pattern. If you're an enemy of America who wants to murder Americans, he will not ask you a single hostile question. I want you to listen to this exchange. This is a snippet of the back and forth between Tucker and the Prime Minister of Qatar.
So last question. I've been personally, not to make it about me, but I have been criticized as being a tool of Qatar. And I just want to say what you already know, which is I've never taken anything from your country and don't plan to. I am, however, tomorrow buying a place in Qatar, both because I am
pay a high check
in Doha, and I'm doing that because I like the city. I think it's beautiful, but also to make the statement that I'm an American and a free man, and I'll be wherever I want to be, which I think is important. But that does kind of leave us in a place where I have not taken any money from Qatar. I have instead given money to Qatar. And I wonder if you feel that that means I've bought you and you will now spew my propaganda.
Well, thank you. Just ask me whatever you want me to do for you, I will do it. But look, Tucker, unfortunately, as I told you, that there are a lot of players putting a lot of efforts to sabotage the relationship between Qatar and the United States and to try to demonize anyone who will come to this country. Our efforts, when we are lobbying or doing, our outreach in the United States, is to make sure that this relationship is safeguarded. And the relationship for us is mutually beneficial. We are not getting aid from the United States. Instead, we are buying from the United States. We are partnering with them. We are investing in the United States investing in Qatar. And this relationship has been always a two-way relationship. And we pay all these amounts for lobbying only to protect and to safeguard this relationship. If we were not being attacked and under a lot of disinformation campaign that's been unfortunately funded by other players who doesn't want to see a U.S.-Qatar relationship flourish, we would spend this money for better things, to do with the relationship.
Sheikh Mohammed, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I appreciate it.
I mean, you look at that question, Senator, and it's one of those that just you scratch your head. Because there's just part of this, you're like, wait, what did I just witness? What did I just watch there? How is this real? And the idea of I'm buying a place, I've never taken anything, I just like it here. It shows I'm a free man. Didn't ask any questions, not a single tough question of a man that is allowing terrorists to sit in his country and to orchestrate more terrorist attacks that have killed Americans.
So understand, this government that is hosting Hamas, that is celebrating Hamas, that is funding anti-American propaganda and anti-Israel propaganda and anti-Semitic propaganda. The prime minister says to Tucker, ask me whatever you want. We will do anything you want. He also says to Tucker, we are spending vast amounts in lobbying. Understand, Qatar spends hundreds of millions of dollars lobbying the United States government, the United States Congress. By the way, Tucker is obsessed with AIPAC because he's decided that Jews are the source of all evil in the world. And Qatar pays 2 to 3 times as much as AIPAC does in lobbying. Now, do you know who AIPAC is? AIPAC are Americans. It is not the government of Israel. AIPAC are Americans who want America and Israel to have a close relationship. And so American citizens, many of whom happen to be Jewish, although not all of them, who support, a lot of actually Christian evangelicals also, who support a strong relationship between the United States and Israel, they do write checks, but they write checks that are an order of magnitude anywhere from a third to a half what Qatar, the foreign government, writes. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars lobbying our government. Tucker claims to be America first. He is literally buying a home in Qatar. Qatar, who is actively funding anti-American propaganda, anti-Semitic propaganda. And by the way, Tucker says, I've never taken a penny from you. By the way, I don't know what kind of sweetheart real estate deal he's getting, but who the heck, what American, let me ask you, Ben, you know a lot of people.
Yeah.
Do you know any other American who wants to buy a home in Qatar?
No, and in fact, I've known a lot of international people. I've never heard of anybody going, I'm heading over to Qatar to go buy a home. Never, not one time. No one. And I know people outside the U.S. They've never said that.
Look, I think there's a reason for it, which is that I don't know why. I've had conversations about why Tucker has decided. By the way, Tucker is actively attacking President Trump's foreign policy. He is furious that President Trump decided to bomb the Iranian nuclear facilities, and even more mad that bombing was incredibly successful. It was the single most important foreign policy and national security decision that President Trump has made in the second term, and Tucker is furious.
By the way, it didn't start World War III, which I'm pretty sure that's what they said was going to happen. Isn't that right? It was going to start World War III.
So let's be clear. It's not they. Tucker predicted if Trump bombed Iran,
yes,
he said it would cause World War III, number one. He said thousands of Americans would die, number two.
Yeah.
And he said America would lose. Iran would beat us in World War III. Now, every one of those predictions was laughably, absurdly wrong. And yet, Tucker is now buying a home in Qatar and saying, hey, you crazy, theocratic, Islamist, America-hating radicals, you're my people. That is really, really, really dangerous.
Yeah, the questions that we just asked there, I really hope that all of you will share those on social media. Share the episode on social media. Share the video we put up on Facebook. We put it up on...
And Ben, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Why do you think Tucker didn't ask a single one of the questions I suggested? I sent 8, and they were not ridiculous questions. They were actually a question if you are in fact America first. And you're interviewing the leader of this country that is funding things that are profoundly anti-American, anybody would ask. If you and I were interviewing them, we would ask those questions. Why do you think Tucker didn't?
I think it's the same reason why he gave a powder puff interview with Vladimir Putin. I think it's the same reason why he was sitting down with the head of Iran. It is because when he goes there, he knows the role he's playing, which is a propagandist for those countries.
I wish that were not the case, but I can't argue against that. He does not ask a single question defending America. Instead, he just embraces leaders that are doing enormous damage to Americans. Yeah. And that, by the way, is, I think, significantly undermining President Trump as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Not America first, that is for sure. Don't forget, we do this show Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Hit that subscribe or download button. Make sure you share this on Facebook. We have the video up there, so you can share it on your timeline there. You can also share the YouTube video we put out of this podcast as well. You can watch it. And if you love watching the show, watch on YouTube. Write us a 5-star review on X or on Facebook or wherever you are on social media. And the Senator and I will see you back here Friday morning.